I love looking through all my old travel journals and flipping the pages and reliving the experiences I had traveling all around the world. This particular one is one I'd love to share with you. I don't think I've ever shown it to you before. And it's a trip that my wife, Jenny, and I took driving from Los Angeles, California, all the way across the United States to New York City, New York, and having all kinds of great adventures along the way. I'd love to share it with you. We're going to go on a big road trip. We'll be driving our little Ford Focus. And we won't be going in a straight line either. We agreed at the beginning that we'd change our route at the drop of a hat if adventure called us down a side road. So we're going to stop at all kinds of famous places and also weird places. We're going to eat road food. We're going to meet strangers. We're going to look for adventure. We're bringing a small suitcase, our cameras, and a bag of art supplies. Let's hit the road. The great thing about traveling is that you have the opportunity to acknowledge the unfamiliar and to embrace it. That's the whole point. It's not just about seeing famous tourist attractions and buying a bunch of postcards. It's about living a different reality, a different life for a week or two. I like to record some of the things that we eat and drink. We try to avoid junk, but a little bit is inevitable. Our first meal on the road was disappointing. We ate Subway sandwiches in a gas station parking lot. The hotel bar at the end of a long day is the perfect place to unwind and to draw a draft or two. Here's a wonderful food truck in Texas. I use my journal to write down conversations that I've had or ideas or insights. So I note down interesting facts that I pick up, like dates or history or local anomalies, weird facts. Here's some facts about Johnny Cash. Johnny was born J.R. Cash, but the Army said he had to have a real name, not just two consonants. The bank named their ATMs after him. He loved Benzedrine and Jesus Christ. And these are guitar necks of all the legends of country music. I saw them in the Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville. And here's a diagram of our car, the trusty Ford Focus. We spend an awful lot of time inside of it, and all these little notes and captions record some of the sort of salient facts about our trusty steed. There are a million odd things along the way, and for me, the weirder, the more particular, the better. We saw lots of other vehicles, truckers, bikers, police cars. We saw a high-speed chase with a half-dozen cop cars. We saw an 18-wheeler whose tire exploded right in front of us, pow, like a stick of dynamite that showered us with shards of rubber. We saw endless signs trying to lure us off the highway to all sorts of exotic detours. We miscalculated our willingness to do laundry, so I recorded our trip to the mall to buy extra underwear to tide us over. Room keys. Now, most places just gave us a plastic card, so when I got a real old-fashioned metal key in Virginia, it was worth taking note of. In the middle of nowhere, Texas, there's a building shaped like a guitar. At one point, Jenny thought that she saw a huge full moon over Arkansas. It turned out to be a Burger King logo. The changing view out of our windshield was another of our traveling companions, and I drew it all kinds of different ways, covering the terrain that whizzed by us at 90 miles an hour when there were no cops around. Here's a spread in which I recorded one notable object after another for several hundred miles, and I kept my palette limited to just highway green and roadwork yellow. Usually nothing's more boring than discussing the weather, but when you're driving across country and you're out in the open all day, every day, well, the weather becomes a major character in the story. Here I looked at the clouds in the car's side mirror, and I wrote about the afternoon rainstorm that seemed to end every day's drive. At one point, we were chased across the Texas plain by a tornado. I made a little teeny drawing about it, but it's enough to ensure that I'm never going to forget that scary moment. People are part of the landscape, too, and I like to catch interesting characters. We stopped in at a Dairy Queen, and I was struck by the diverse group of customers there. We saw a strange mixture of pasty-faced hackers and bubbly cheerleaders and hobbling old geriatrics, and all of them were eating ice cream sundaes. One night on the Baltimore waterfront, Jenny and I ate fresh crabs and we drew each other's portraits. We'd had a couple of beers apiece, and that may have contributed to the quality of our drawing style. Sharing your drawing can be a great way to meet new people. In Nashville here, I drew the band in a bar on Broadway, and they got so excited that they insisted on snapping Instagram pictures of the page with Jenny and me as if we were the stars. They would have gladly played any song that we asked them to. When we went to the Hatch show print studio, which is one of the meccas of graphic design, I met the staff of printers, and they looked through my drawings and they loved them, and so they decided to print a special woodblock print in my book using a wooden spoon. All new pals, thanks to my sketchbook. Now, traveling's not just about drawing garbage cans and roadkill, I know that. I like to see the famous sights as much as the next tourist. I think a drawing is so much nicer and more memorable than a postcard. So I make sure to record all the famous places, even if I've already seen them, a zillion times in 100 guidebooks. The challenge is to find a way to personalize what I've seen a million times before so that it records my experience and my impression. So on the second day of our cross-country trip, we stopped at the Grand Canyon, which is, well, it's grand. The canyon is so vast that I could have spent a few days drawing it, but we had about an hour before we had to push on, and so I looked around and I saw two spindly little trees standing right there on the edge. They'd been weathered and wind-whipped for ages, and I decided that they'd be my subject, dwarfed as they were by the endlessness of the canyon. And so I sat down and I drew the details of the trees. I captured each branch and leaf, most of the leaves, and then I lightly suggested the canyon beyond, restricting myself to just a few colors, red and ochre of the rock, verging to the indigo of the horizon and the clear blue skies above. I added in a couple of brightly colored tourists to remind me just how crowded the canyon viewing platform was at high noon when we got there. Oh, and I got a couple of stamps from the information office. There's special rubber stamps like these in every national park, and it's a nice little graphic souvenir to add to your sketchbook. Sometimes my drawings are just illustrations of my text. And sometimes a drawing is just a reminder. Like here in Nashville, I didn't draw my hotel, just the light fixture to represent its opulence. Man, that place was plush. When we got to Sedona, I knew that I just had to spend some serious time drawing those red rocks that fill the landscape. As soon as we got to our hotel, I sat down at the bar and I painted the mountain that looms overhead. Now, Sedona invites meditation and contemplation, and there was so much to explore in this rock face. Studying the changing light, the details of the rock, the sparse vegetation, they all gave me a deeper insight and a connection to this incredible beauty. I'm never going to forget this ancient rock. When we stopped in Hatch, New Mexico, it was a little town full of these giant statues from old abandoned roadside attractions. Here's the robot that watched us eat lunch. And we went to Marfa, Texas, it's an art community which was established by the minimalist sculptor Donald Judd. It's about 500 miles from anywhere, right in the border of Chihuahua, Mexico. When they talk about Marfa, folks say it's hard to get to and harder to explain. Now, right outside of the town, two German artists built a Prada store. The windows and the shelves are lined with shoes and handbags, and it sits on this long, empty stretch of highway outside of a town that has about 100 people. Albuquerque, New Mexico means just one thing to me: Breaking Bad, one of my favorite TV shows. We found Walter White's house on the map, and we showed up first thing in the morning. I plunked down on the sidewalk and I started to draw. It was all kind of distracting and a bit overwhelming. I mean, I half expected Walter or Skylar to come out, and with all the excitement and distraction, I only managed to get the roughest of lines down. But as we drove across New Mexico, I finished my drawing in the car. I wanted to give the house a sort of supernormal look, underscored with some sort of sinister feeling. So I concocted a bunch of textures, and then I added a very simple color scheme. It was in part based on the real house, but also representing the barrenness of this New Mexican landscape that we were driving through, and my residual feelings about the sort of suspense and edgy blankness of the TV show. So the night skies in the west are staggeringly huge, and there's so little ambient light that you can see zillions of stars in the Milky Way and the awesome infinite universe. And I wanted to capture that splendor in my sketchbook, but how? I did it almost by accident. I had planned to paint my whole page a dark bluish gray and then to go in and draw tiny stars in white gouache. But as the brush moved over this rough watercolor paper, it left bare spots that looked to me like constellations. So I left the page with those rough dots and streaks, and I felt that could stand for that feeling of wonder that I had the night before as I gazed up at the dark sky. Our hotel room in Dallas had a window that overlooked a street, but I became sort of fixated by this complicated telephone wires that were out there. I decided to draw them, and I was thinking about the change in route that Jenny and I had just been discussing. We had decided to head east to Arkansas and Tennessee rather than south to New Orleans. And as I drew the wires, I realized that they were sort of like a road map, and that this bird that was sitting right there was where Dallas was on the map. Sometimes art just pops out of your tired brain and appears on the page. Traveling stirs up emotions. I could be jet-lagged or homesick or just overwhelmed by beauty or excitement, so I'd write it down. In Nashville, I was drawing some old memorial buildings when I was struck by this complicated thought about how Nashville is all about old and new, tradition and innovation, kind of like country music is. And I mused on that for a while, and I surrounded all the buildings with words. We pulled into this abandoned campground outside Two Guns near the Arizona border, and we wandered through its collapsing buildings, and we explored the graffiti and the colossal murals and the ransacked buildings. And suddenly I felt that delicious fear resurface. I expected to hear a chainsaw start up in any minute. I love great travel writing. Sitting in an armchair, I can be transported to the most remote outpost. And I love to play with language, with words to capture the feelings and sights that I'm encountering for the first time. I try to pick my language really carefully. What's the perfect word to describe those giant rocks in Sedona? I used carbunculated and extravagant dollop. I'm not sure why, they just popped out of my pen. And in Albuquerque, a town that I thought I could never spell, I came up with this thought, Albuquerque. It's something more poetic and apropos somehow than the way the locals spell it, ABQ. One night in Texas, it rained really hard, and early the next morning I went for a walk through this little town, and I saw this granary at a feedlot. I sat on a railroad tie, and I drew the scene quickly with a brush. I wanted to capture this passing rain and to work quickly. And the light was changing pretty fast, but there were still puddles on the ground and a general sense of this heavy, moist moodiness. About a quarter of an hour, I made this. I'm not super precious about my travel journal. It's my traveling companion, and it's got to pull its weight. I use it to keep track of all aspects and details of my journey. My book contains a list of places that we want to visit before we set out, places that we may or may not get to, and then I check them off as we do see them. And then there are packing and to-do lists of restaurant recommendations, potential itineraries and what they'll cost us in mileage, a record of each day and where we stopped, a log of what the odometer said each night. I use my travel journals to record places that we've stayed, things we've eaten, places we've visited, people I've met, their email addresses and phone numbers. I paste in receipts and boarding passes and cards from restaurants and museum tickets, all kinds of things. Sometimes I'll draw the tickets instead of pasting them in. Here's a Marfa bumper sticker about minimalist art. I was going to buy it, but I saved myself $5 by drawing my own version. I jot down minor events that I don't have time to go into right now. Later they'll jog my memory, or maybe they won't, and I'll just have another mystery on my hands. I collect rubber stamps from national parks and post offices, and every moleskin has a convenient little pocket in the back to collect the receipts and stubs. Oh, and finally the front of the book, which bears stickers and souvenirs from various spots along the way. With a glance at my bookshelf, I can always tell this book by its cover. Every day on this trip I posted a picture on Instagram and Facebook so that my friends could get a taste of what we were doing. I didn't want to be a bore with a whole carousel of travel slides, but I wanted to share what we were doing. And I tried to design these pictures to make them little art statements, to boil down the essence of the day, just as I might with a drawing in my sketchbook. And finally, we're back in New York City. 10 days, 64 hours at the wheel, 3,717 miles, home sweet home. It was a great trip, but it was also great to be back with the rest of our pack in the greatest city on earth. Travel journaling is so much fun. Thanks so much for coming along the trip with me and going through and sharing these memories with me of this incredible trip. If you've never kept a travel journal, I strongly urge you to do it on your next trip.